Welcome back to the Jungle Fever podcast. I'm Ethan. Sergeant Aiden Crowley is here alongside me, and I have good news for Bengals fans out there. They got a little bit better yesterday, and that is, I think, all you could really hope for. We've seen over the last couple of years that the Bengals have typically sat out that first wave, with the big exception of 2021. They've relatively sat out that first big wave of free agents, right? You think back, and that's where all the frustration has stemmed really the last couple of years where they've kind of sat on their hands a little bit, obviously last year in particular, and you saw the results, right? So now the Bengals have decided, and clearly there was some push from the front office, and we'll give them their flowers because I think they earned something yesterday. The Bengals made two big time deals yesterday, two big time players that are going to come in and be pretty much instant starters on this defense. We'll start out with Bryan Cook, homecoming for a former Bearcat, former Mount Healthy graduate, born and raised in Cincinnati, comes home right after a very successful tenure in Kansas City, where he was able to become a Super Bowl champion twice, and now he comes home. And Ayden, obviously, we'll talk about the contract in a second. We'll talk about that. We'll also talk about the other player the Bengals signed in just a moment. But I think we'll talk about Boye Mafe. I love that move, but I think this move was such an easy layup in theory, but it really wasn't, and they got it done, right? One of the best, if not the best, free agent safety on the market is going to Cincinnati.
Yeah, A plus, A plus plus. I love this in every way. Like you mentioned, he's a Cincinnati kid from Mount Healthy, has been in Clifton for a while. He was at UC. He's also a winner. He's a Super Bowl champion, two-time Super Bowl champion with the Chiefs. He had that interception. It was more of an arm punt in the AFC Championship game on
That
Seahawks
was
on
just an
that deep ball,
unbelievable play.
that
That
tip
was,
pass that he
yeah.
has. I'm sure a lot of Bengals fans will remember that one. Um, He's like you mentioned, I would say he's the best safety on the market. And I think this is a commitment from the Bengals that we hadn't seen since Jesse Bates walked out the door. They were trying Band-Aid solution after Band-Aid solution. It was Nick Scott, it was Geno Stone, it was Mike Hilton in a kind of similar role at times. It was just weird. It was they were trying anything and it wasn't working. So this is a commitment to that. A guy who is still young, still, I think, relatively ascending. I think he's a great player. Obviously, 3 years, 40 and a quarter, so $40.25 million total on the deal. That's commitment to the position. I was really excited to see it. It felt like coming in, the Bengals had like four boxes that they had to check, right? For free agency. Reisner was one. They got it before free agency was done. They had a open spot, literally an open spot for starting safety. Cook fills that role. Then obviously we'll get to it later. The help on the edge after Trey walks, they did. Now they still have a linebacker position that I'd like to see addressed, but for now, this was my favorite signing. Obviously there was only two, but I love the fit.
Well, obviously, we saw a lot of teams get really aggressive yesterday. You know, Tennessee, Las Vegas, I think two teams in particular that spent a lot of money. The Giants really went crazy. At the end of the day, free agency is kind of a crapshoot, right? You have a lot of guys that are out there. You know, you get all these dudes that are coming off their rookie deals, right? Like Carolina, another team that spent a lot of money yesterday, right? Between Devin Lloyd and Jalen Phillips. We'll talk about Lloyd later because it was pretty clear the Bengals had some interest there in Devin Lloyd. But again, going back to Bryan Cook, let me read you here some of the contract details I've just pulled up. It is a 3 year, $40.25 million contract. He's going to get $18 million in year one with a $14 million signing bonus. And then the cap hits and cash spend over the 3 years of that deal. Cash spend will be 18 million in year one, as I just mentioned, with an 8 million cap hit. Year two will be 10 million cash spend with a 15 mil cap hit, and 2028 will be an 11 million cash spend with a 16.2 million dollar cap hit. I saw this in a couple places. This is a very Bengalsy contract. It is front loaded, right? Heavy on the front, lighter on the back, and this is in terms of the cash spend, I should say that, in terms of the cash spend. But Bryan Cook, like, this is a pretty clear going to be here for 3 years player, right? If they want to extend him further, that would be great. But he will not be leaving before that contract is up. And going back to the player himself, going away from the cap, I mean, you want to hear the stat that I think sums up this entire signing. Bryan Cook, over his 4 years in the NFL, has missed 22 tackles. Geno Stone, in 1 year last year, missed 24 tackles. If that doesn't tell you where the point of emphasis was at the safety position, there isn't much else.
The anti-Geno Stone.
Really. And again, everything I've seen about Bryan Cook, I saw obviously Dan Horde, who is not only a big voice for the Bengals, but a huge voice for the Bearcats, talked glowingly about the person that Bryan Cook is. Boye Mafe is also a great person. We'll get to that in a second, too. But, Bryan Cook's a guy that may well be here a couple of years and end up a team captain in a couple of years, right? Like you're getting that type of person. Obviously, multi-time Super Bowl champion with the Chiefs, somebody who has been there, right? The Bengals have put a lot of emphasis on that really throughout their recent free agent signings. You go back to their offensive line spending a couple years ago where they brought in Ted Karras, who won a Super Bowl in New England. They brought in Alex Kappa, who won a Super Bowl in Tampa Bay, right? They have put an emphasis on that in free agency is that winning culture, bringing that winning culture to Cincinnati. You kind of saw that dwindle a little last year, right? They
And it
had a
wasn't,
built,
yeah, none of it was on the defensive side of the ball.
right,
Like you think
right.
about who the defensive captains were last year. Logan Wilson was traded throughout the middle of the year. Trey Hendrickson, that. And then it was BJ Hill because he was old. Like they didn't have any people to pick. And
E-
so I agree with you. It was desperately needed. Guys who have been there and done that. Cook is a guy who has been there and done that. Very successful with one of the most successful organizations in our lifetime.
Yeah, and I was stoked about this contract when I saw the Cook name pop up. I'm sure a lot of people out there have their Twitter notifications on. They're still going. I mean, we have a
Mhm.
trend of having things happen while we're recording this show. So
Mhm.
if the Bengals do something, that'd be cool. I mean, the Lions just signed Isaiah Pacheco. We've seen a couple of those that second wave kind of deals that goes on. Obviously, Tuesday and Wednesday. There's still some huge free agents out there, including Trey Hendrickson, which we'll get to towards the end of the show. But I think that this is like an A plus. I got no notes about this deal.
No,
It was a lineup. It was one of those where it was like, if he went somewhere else on this kind of deal, people would be incensed, right? The Cincinnati Bengal fan base would be incensed, and I don't blame them. But they don't have to be because they got it done. So hats off to Duke Tobin, everybody in that front office, right? They got this one done, and now we'll move on to the next one they got done, which was a couple hours later. Boye Mafe, another Super Bowl champion, is coming over to Cincinnati from Seattle. This one's a 3 year, $60 million deal,
big
20
money.
million 20 million per year for a very talented edge rusher. And there's some interesting trends with Boye Mafe. He's been in the league now 4 years. His second year in the league, he actually racked up 9 sacks. And then obviously Seattle let Pete Carroll walk and they bring in Mike McDonald. And ever since Mike McDonald came in, Mafe's, it's not to say he's gotten worse. It's just the snap count has kind of gone down a little
His
bit. He
role
hasn't
changed.
quite had the same level of opportunity that he did in the early stages of his career. Only 5 sacks 2 years ago, and then only 2 sacks last year. However, there is a caveat to those numbers because the pass rush win rate is among the top 10 in the NFL, right? And this signing, and a lot of people have said this, is very reminiscent of what the Bengals did just 5 years ago with Trey Hendrickson and Carl Lawson, right? Joseph Osai is off to the New York Jets, 3 year, $36 million deal. There was just not a likely chance that the Bengals were ever going to deal with David Mulugeta, right? We've been there before, and I think Osai deserved a pay raise, right? He was on a 1 year, $7 million deal last year. I think he earned himself a nice second contract. So congratulations to him on that. But they let Joseph Osai walk and they bring in Boye Mafe, who I think is going to be an upgrade. And I don't even think that's a slight on Osai. I just think that you're getting in Boye Mafe a talented young player who, again, Super Bowl experience, Super Bowl champion. And I think, again, the Bengals get aggressive, right? $100 million on day one. We've seen that since 22? I don't think so.
Yeah, to be honest with you, the Cook signing happened, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they were done for the day, or maybe it was
Mm,
something small. I was like, okay, we kind of did did our thing that we typically do. We got the big one, and then maybe we could go around the edges. But I think Duke absolutely is committed to what he said in that press conference of we have the money to spend, we know where to attack, and we're going to go out and do it. I'm going to give him credit for a lot of this. I think these two signings were some of the best of the day. Boye, for me, is a top five, top six edge rusher on the market, somewhere around there. I mean, he's not Trey Hendrickson, he's not Jalen Phillips, but I don't think they were ever reaching those numbers. For 20 million a year, a guy like you said who's ascending, very similar to how Trey Hendrickson was in New Orleans, someone who the analytic profile fits somebody with more production than what's been put on the field. He's a
Exactly.
great athlete. He's a little undersized, which maybe is the one concern with a guy like that. But I think his athleticism has made up for that size profile for sure. The question is, can he be a one, right? Or is Miles Murphy the one, right? It feels like you still
I'm
don't
gonna
have
be
an
honest.
alpha.
I'm gonna be honest. That's a good problem to have right now.
Right,
When
right,
if we're having this discussion in October, it's a different story.
right.
But right now, you think about this defensive line should, in theory, be improved, right? Boye Mafe, Miles
Well,
Murphy,
they need to do
hopefully,
more, but
of course, fingers crossed, the healthy Shamar Stewart, if he can start to kick it on, right? And obviously there is, you got BJ Hill still on the interior, but there is still very much room to grow there. The Bengals pretty clearly went after John Franklin Myers as well. And the thing about that, and I can touch on it briefly here, I do want to go back to Mafe, but we'll touch on it here quickly. Bengals were never getting a 20 mil a year for John Franklin Myers. Just was
that
never happening. And he got that from Tennessee.
so we talked about it before free agency even started. The
Yep.
defensive
You
tackle free
did hit
agent
this right
class
on the
is
head.
is
Mhm.
a it was atrocious. So
Not
John
good.
Franklin Myers was going to get a bag, and it's because he is good. He was really good last year. But you think about his age. He's been in the league 7 years. This was kind of his first breakout time. It was the perfect time for a breakout. But he was the perfect free agent. If you were a player. Now, obviously, teams like Tennessee, teams like Cincinnati, teams like Carolina that wanted to bolster that group, they knew that they had to pay because who else are you going to pay in that defensive tackle free agent class? So I wasn't surprised that that bidding war happened, and then I wasn't surprised that the Bengals said, "All right, we're going to go
I
elsewhere."
was less mad about it. Like I was like, oh dang, that's a guy they could have got. And then I saw the numbers and I was like, 21 mil a year. I'm okay
It's
on
cheap.
that. Like, and we
It's
know
cheap.
that the Bengals just don't like to pay those older guys that kind of money. We've seen that. That's been a trend since the dawn of time, right? They just don't do that. So, again, now let's go back to Boye Mafe. I do think again, talking about that trend when Mike McDonald came in as head coach to now, right? The numbers are still good. That's the thing. Like the underlying traits, he's still one of the highest graded PFF defenders. But also, Bryan Cook's another guy that just is like, I think he was a top 8 safety last year, according to PFF. So PFF loved both of these guys. I think when you look at what Boye Mafe has been able to do in limited snaps, right? I get 2 sacks, right? That's going to cause some Bengals fans to be like, oh God, right? Especially with what happened with Shamar Stewart last year. Two apples to oranges. I will say that, right? It is a very similar situation. Again, it's almost the exact same situation to what happened with Trey Hendrickson 5 years ago, right? Trey Hendrickson had a few more sacks, but I remember, I mean, if you were on Bengals Twitter around that time, the phrase coverage sack was the word of the year, the word of the day when the Bengals signed Trey Hendrickson to that 4 year, $60 million deal, which, again, almost the exact same, just minus a year here because that's just the value of the position has gone up, right? So, again, I think that with what they've done here with Mafe and with what they've done with getting Bryan Cook in, you've got two game changers, right? In fact, two guys I had in my mock off season as guys that they should go out and get, right? Now I also had Devin Lloyd, right? They didn't get it, right? It did seem like there was some eggs in that basket from the Bengals. Carolina ends up getting him on what I think is a pretty good deal, 3 year, 45 million. Again, that's an All Pro last year for Jacksonville. Carolina with two big splashes with Lloyd, and then paid a lot of money to Jalen Phillips. The
A lot of
interesting,
money.
I wanted
A
to get
lot
your
of money.
thoughts.
Did you?
Yeah, I was just about to say your thoughts on the edge market, and we'll relate it back to Trey Hendrickson here, because Jalen Phillips got $120 million over the 4 years, right? Odafe Owe, a little bit less, but still a great deal for him in Washington
400,
for
right?
4 years and $100 million, right? Some of these other edge players are starting to go, but then you had the proverbial best one on the market in Trey Hendrickson, a guy who has over 60 sacks in the last 4 seasons, which is in the top five of the NFL. And let's just start here. And we've said this a number of times. Fire the agent, dude. That agent has cost Trey Hendrickson multi-millions of dollars,
Hmm.
like tens of millions of dollars. And you go back to last year, the Bengals offered Trey Hendrickson a 3 year, $95 million extension, over 30 million a year. And he's not getting that right now on the open market from these teams.
The Bengals offered him the contract that he wants right now. Um, Circumstances obviously change. So he had the injury that put him out pretty much the
Of
entire
course.
year last year. That's not something that last offseason Trey Hendrickson was really thinking about. He thought he'd go out there
Of
and
course.
crush it again, but that's the reality of being 31, 32. How old is he? Somewhere around
31,
there.
I believe.
Yeah, 31. So that's the reality. You're an edge, which is a position that sees a steep drop off at that age, just given the athleticism that's required to be successful at the position. You're coming off a major injury. The production has been there, so people are interested, but they're not interested for that price tag. Now, I will continue to say that the Bengals mishandled it in terms of getting the
Sure.
maximum amount of value out of Trey Hendrickson.
I agree.
When I say that, the Bengals were correct in not necessarily wanting to go there with Trey this offseason. So if that's the case, trade him. But that's a topic for a different day. So if you're Trey, I'm I don't know what to tell you. That bridge has
And
been burnt
I
in
guess
Cincinnati. He's
now
not coming back. But
after a day of free agency as well, perhaps the tag and trade makes a little less sense, right? Because you have, right, you if he had been off the board at 2 o'clock yesterday, right? If he was one of the first names and he gets like, let's say a 3 year, $100 million deal with somebody. Like, let's say Carolina paid him like a lot of money as opposed to Jalen Phillips, right? Like, then maybe the Bengals, like, we could have sat on here and complained that they didn't tag and trade him. But now it's been over 24 hours. The market seems to be like it's there, but it's cool, right? Like, it's like you don't have teams necessarily baying to sign
yeah,
him,
I'll
right?
say I'll say this. Jonathan Jones from CBS just reported, as of this morning, there were teams I spoke with who said the gap between what Trey wanted and what they were willing to pay was close to $10 million a year.
Fire the agent, dude. I don't know what else to tell you. I think that agent has completely. You think all the way back to 2023, the 1 year deal he signed that year, which was it made no sense from his perspective. If this was all about the money, it made no sense from that perspective for
Mhm.
him. Um, then going back to last year, you declined, right? That was I think a relatively fair extension. I know that it was that last year that they were getting hung up on with the guarantees, but like again, hindsight's 2020, but still, right?
Right.
It's a it's a tough situation. I feel for Trey, right? I do still think there's a couple of good years left for him in the NFL, but
For sure.
he will sign, right? He'll get upwards of 20 to 25 million, but he's gonna lose out on 10 plus $1 million a year.
Mhm.
That's really
Absolutely.
all there is to it
And,
for
and
him.
that, yeah, it's one of those rare instances, I think, in my opinion, where you can say the Bengals were right. I think the
Rare,
Bengals
right?
were right
Rare.
in this situation, which is interesting. There were also a couple subtractions. We're talking about all
Of
the
course,
additions. There were
right?
some subtractions as well. I think the biggest ones is Noah Fant going to the Saints, obviously. And then Cordell Volson. Do you really? I mean, he signed with the Titans, correct? And then obviously Trey is
Yep.
going to be gone as well. So
Yeah, and then
those
we
are
talked
the
about
two.
Osai as well, Osai to the Jets. The
Yeah,
Jets were
aside with
another team that spent a lot of money yesterday. I will say about Noah Fant, keep an eye on a Bengals signing free agent tight end. There have
or
been
draft.
some or a draft. I do think that's a position the Bengals are looking to upgrade in, right? I don't know. We didn't talk about this last week. Eric All actually announced on Twitter earlier this week that he'll be back in capacity this year. Great news. I hope that Eric All is back too, right? Obviously, the knee injuries have been just debilitating for him, but he's a great football player. We saw some real flashes when he was in the lineup back in 2024. So hopefully, if he can finally keep it together and stay healthy, that could be big. But I think regardless, the Bengals aren't going to
Can't
want to
bank
take the
on
risk,
it. Yeah.
right? You
Can't
can't
bank
take
on
the risk. Drew Sample exists. And then, I mean, Mike Gesicki isn't even really a tight end anymore. So
it. I
I
was gonna
think,
say the Bengals' current tight end room. Sorry to cut you off. The Bengals' current tight end
and
room
Tanner
is
Hudson.
yeah. The current tight end room is someone who's really good in the pass game but can't block, and then someone who's really good in the blocking game but can't catch. So I would not be shocked if they draft or really small deal
You
somebody who
keep an
can.
eye on Chiga Conquo is a name I've heard a little bit, formerly of Tennessee. I don't like they won't go for like Njoku, right? They're not going to go for a heavy hitter because they already have enough of those. But I think like a Chiga Conquo who's got some receiving upside, who can also block very well, right? I think they're looking for more of that hybrid, like prototypical tight end. So keep an eye on that market. That market hasn't moved a ton, right? We saw like Bellinger. We saw Isaiah Likely, and Bellinger went to I can't remember where he went. I know Likely went to the Giants. Glad to see him out of my division. See, buddy. Um, Speaking of, that's another thing we can talk about because the a lot of the teams in the division had busy days, right? The Ravens lost a lot of talent from their team last year. Obviously, Tyler Linderbaum is gone. He is off to Vegas, so add that to the Max Crosby trade, I guess. Um, that's a 3-year, $81 million deal. Holy smokes. Um,
I mean, Las Vegas. This isn't a Las Vegas podcast, so we're not going to go far into it. But they needed something like that
oh, yeah.
with Clint Kubiak coming in the door and what he likes to run specifically in his run game. They needed an athletic interior offensive
And you
lineman who can
have
get out in those
such a
wide schemes.
talent in Ashton Genty, and you haven't been able, I mean, what he averaged, like 3 yards a carry last year? He's better than that. We know that, but the offensive line wasn't there. So
Right. And Jackson
they need
Powers
that.
Johnson's going to kick the guard, and
Yep.
I think they're going to be well improved. Anyway,
Absolutely right. They spent a ton of money on the defensive side as well. They signed a couple of the big linebackers. So I like what Vegas did. In terms of some other players, Alohi Gilman went to the Chargers late last night, or was it the Chargers? Or no, it was
the
the
Chiefs.
Chiefs. Excuse me, it was the Chiefs. That's their,
That
I
was
guess,
the
their Brian
Brian
Cook
Brian
replacement.
Cook replacement.
Um, I believe who else? I mean, we mentioned Likely is gone. Um,
I mean,
they did
Owe,
not
but
tend.
Owe was on the Chargers for that late stretch
Yeah,
of
yeah.
for a
They
while.
did not tender Keaton Mitchell, so he's not
Sounds
back.
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, speedster, right? Guy that kind of provided something a little different in that backfield for Baltimore. But yeah, obviously they're going to be a very different looking Baltimore team. Obviously with a new head coach as well. Some of the same heavy hitters, right? Lamar, Henry, Flowers, right? And obviously Crosby on the defensive side, Kyle Hamilton there, Roquan Smith. They got a game changer at every level, right? But some of those supporting cast players, and they're going to have to draft really well, and they have a lot of comp picks. So they're going to have to continue to draft well as they have throughout the years. So,
That's been my thing with Baltimore is like their blue chip talent has been so good.
they lead they
It's some
lead
of the
the
best in the
NFL
NFL.
in compensatory picks.
Right. But the edges, like the stuff where like it truly matters, and I think what sets you over the edge when you're making a Super Bowl push, in my opinion, just hasn't been there for Baltimore. And I don't think they're good enough at certain positions where they
And
just
now
hope
there's
that the
no
blue chip talent carries them over the
they
top and
don't
get to
have
the
a first round pick to address that now, this year or next year. So could be very interesting to see what the way that Baltimore attempts to attack this draft, right? They don't have the first round pick, but they do have a lot of mid to late round picks. So we'll see. They've had some big hits in those drafts before, so they're going to have to get those right. They have to get them right.
It's like
Um,
who's pass rushing aside Max Crosby?
yeah,
Are you hoping for Green to have a leap? He
did
was
not
not
have a huge.
good
Yeah.
his rookie year. I just stuff like that, like Edge 2.
Is Nnamdi Madubuike ever going to play a snap in the league again? I think it's a fair question to ask with the neck injury he had last year, right? There's been some rumors of retirement, nothing official, but like obviously that's a game changer on the inside for Baltimore, and we don't even know if he's going to play again. So that like Baltimore may look to attack the draft. We'll see. So That's Baltimore. Pittsburgh was active too. They
They
made
had
a
a great
trade.
day, if I can't say.
Yeah, Michael Pittman Jr. comes over. Obviously, the Colts spent a whole lot of money on Alec Pierce. 4 year, 116 or 14.
14. Because I
A
will say
lot.
this. I will say this. That T. Higgins deal, already a bargain.
It's already aging well, right? I know when you have to pull the teeth to spend the money, right? But it still looks good after a year or two. Really doesn't matter in the NFL as long as you do it, right? Even if it was early, right? Or if it was late, sorry, in the Bengals case, it still looks good after a year. So, um, yeah, obviously with that, Colts had a little bit of a cap crunch. We still don't know what they're going to do with Daniel Jones. We didn't have any updates on that yesterday. So over they go. They send Michael Pittman to Pittsburgh. Little pick swap. I think it was a cap salary dump from Indianapolis, and then the Colts pretty much, or excuse me, the Steelers pretty much instantly re-signed him. 3 year, $59 million extension. So yeah, you've got a duo on the outside for the Steelers this year, which was their big struggle last year was you had DK Metcalf, but they were really struggling to find a guy next to him, around him. They didn't really have
An
that second.
option.
Yeah, right. They didn't have a second option. Michael Pittman's a very, very viable second option. He'll instantly be up there with some of the best wide receiver twos in the NFL. So, I mean, now when you look at Pittsburgh's offense. I think they signed the guy Rico Dowdle.
Dowdle.
Rico
Dowdle.
Dowdle. Yep.
That's their
Pretty
Kenny.
exactly. Like pretty much a like for like Kenneth Gainwell replacement because he went to Tampa Bay.
Well,
Um,
two very, very different players.
well, yeah, obviously you're not getting the receiving
Right.
output from him that you would from Gainwell. But now, I mean, you've got a very intriguing backfield in Warren and Dowdle. I don't know how you split those carries. That's going to be very interesting, and that's a problem for Mike McCarthy to address. Still don't know who the quarterback is.
Caleb Johnson's just there.
Yeah,
Still done. Like
yeah,
I
that
don't
fumble
know.
against Seattle probably cost him his career, unfortunately. What's it called? So now, they still don't have Rodgers. Rodgers has been relatively mum so far on his future. He likes attention. It'll draw out probably, but I think tentatively he'll be their quarterback next year. I wouldn't be surprised if Pittsburgh looks at quarterbacks in this upcoming draft, whether it's in the first round or whether it's in a much deeper late round draft for quarterbacks. They could, opt to go that route, even though they did just draft Will Howard last year in those mid rounds. So I don't know. Will they look to draft like a Ty Simpson in the first round or a maybe a late riser in the process, like a Cole Payton or something like that? I don't think Cole Payton's a first round pick. I think the only other quarterback I can really see going in the first round is Ty Simpson. But you know, they could do it. Who knows, right? I mean, Ty Simpson's been pretty good so far in the pre-draft process. So
The Steelers just confuse me. I don't get it. I don't understand the direction of their franchise. They don't make sense in my brain. Michael Pittman Jr. Kind of on the tail end of his prime, I guess. He's like an old-ish kind of guy. So like you get him, are you going for it? Jamal Dean, older guy as well that they signed from Tampa Bay. Aaron Rodgers, well past his prime. So you have all these guys who like are obviously, I don't think part of the long-term success of your team, but you're not in a position to compete for a Super Bowl unless they think they can, which in that case, I don't know if I just don't see what they're seeing. I don't understand it. They're just so stuck. And I just don't understand why they're so against blowing it up. It feels like they just need to blow it
well,
up.
I,
And
I
they just
really what
refuse
I
to do
do
it. And they're
think
just in
could happen
limbo.
is if they have a disaster start to the season. Like they start like 1-6, right?
But
Like
I think they're good enough to where that won't happen. They're just
does it
so
is it
confusing.
just do we is McCarthy just Tomlin 2.0? Like do they
I think he's
just
a slightly worse version of Mike Tomlin. That was the main thing with that.
offensive Tomlin?
Like they went from Mike Tomlin because they were frustrated that it got stale or whatever. They can't push past that barrier, and they just hired a slightly worse version of him. I just their franchise confuses me.
Yeah. Pittsburgh will be interesting. And then, oh, the Browns. I think they made the single worst deal of the day yesterday, bringing in Zion Johnson, a guy who really just has never had it at the NFL level. was played for the Chargers, gave up 3 sacks. We had 3 sacks assigned to him in that playoff game against New England. Gave up the third most pressures in the NFL from the guard position last year, out of I think over 70 accredited guards. They gave him 18 million plus a year. Go ahead,
Yeah.
sure thing.
They're in the draft for next year. I don't really know what to say about Cleveland.
Yeah,
That's how they vibe. There were some rumblings about a Miles Garrett trade. Miss me with that. Get out of here. That's
stop,
never happening.
stop.
Just stop it.
You
Uh,
dug the grave, Miles. Go 6-11 for the rest of your career.
I can go on a tangent about Miles Garrett forever. He's probably one of my least favorite players in the NFL, but we won't go there.
He's
Um,
woke.
he made his bed and he doesn't want to
Need
sleep in it.
that?
Just sleep in
Exactly.
it. So.
Exactly. I think they signed another linebacker too. Oh, the guy from the Jets, Quincy Williams, which I think is good, right? JOK is done, right? Which is sad because I think JOK is a great football player. Um
He's an incredible
and
football player.
yeah, unbelievable. Obviously, concussions are scary, right? And that's a terrible thing to have happen to you. But you have a fantastic rookie who came in Karsten Schweissinger, and getting an established vet like Quincy Williams alongside him, I think is good is a good job by Cleveland. All right, you lose Devin Bush, he to Chicago in free agency. So yeah, bringing in a guy like Quincy Williams, like smart business from Cleveland there. So I'll give him a check mark for that addition, but I do not give them a check mark for this Ion Johnson one. That I mean, that's an offensive line that needs a whole lot of help, and you
Yep.
know, I
So
still
where
think they're a ways away from getting it.
Yeah. So now I'm curious, by the way, Keame Fairbairn, highest paid kicker in the NFL now, just happened.
Yep.
That's cool, I guess. So there's still room. The Bengals have about like what 18 million in cap space,
Yep.
so we have a
There's
little bit of time
absolutely
here.
still room.
Where would you like to see improvement still?
Um, I think there are a few things they could do. Obviously, there's interest in a linebacker. I think that's the first one. I think my guy here would be Leo Chenal from Kansas City. I think going
Just
after a
bring
guy
him
like
and Cook.
that, what was that?
Just bring him and Cook over, huh? Both the
Right,
Chiefs.
right. I mean, look, you saw what Chanel was able to do in Kansas City, right? He's still on the market. I do think that the Bengals will pivot there. I do think again, I think they were in for Lloyd. I do think that they were probably a runner-up in that race. And I think that they shows that they have the money and they have the impetus now to go and sign Chanel to a relatively similar deal that Lloyd got. I think they've given that money to linebackers before. They gave it to Logan Wilson. They gave it to Jermaine Pratt. So, I think you go get a Leo Chanel to play alongside a Demetrius Knight Jr. Give him that helping hand along the inside. And I think from what Al Golden has kind of said over the last couple of days, right? I think we're done with the Demetrius Knight Jr. at edge experiment. I think he's given up on that, thank God. So getting it's why I think Devin Lloyd would have been a perfect fit because he's one of the best pass rushing linebackers. But unfortunately, not all good things can happen. Chenal isn't quite the same edge rushing linebacker, but he's unbelievable in coverage. So you kind of take that trade off there, and we'll kind of see what the trade, I suppose, is there. But I would go for Chanel. Again, keep an eye on the tight end market, right? I think there might be some looks there. And then I think they'll keep an eye on the defensive tackle market, which post Franklin Myers has not moved. There are some solid free agents that are out there that, you're not getting a Pro Bowler, right? Maybe a former a Pro Bowler, and if you want to bring in Calais Campbell, but like you're not getting a superstar, let's put it that way, but you are getting some guys who will be better than what you've had. And look,
I think there's an obvious one. I think DJ Reader's still just kind of floating
yeah,
around. And
very
you bring him
could
in,
very well happen.
in my opinion, less for the production and more so of what he means to the locker room and what he means to the team.
And the run game, right? We know how important he was, right? DA Reader, not a stat sheet stuffer, right? He doesn't, he's not gonna rack up 10 sacks, but he's just a physical body on the inside. And is he what he was in 2021? Absolutely not, right? But is he still a very viable NFL player? And is he better than what the Bengals have had up there since he left? Yeah, I would say so. So he spoke very highly of the Bengals organization on Kay Adams the other day. It is one that I do think could happen. So keep an eye
Yeah.
on that too.
Someone
And then
who
I
fits.
think
Oh,
that
sorry.
might be just about it. I don't know what else you really need to do. And then you've got they do have an extra sixth and an extra seventh this year. They don't have a fifth because of the Flacco trade. that's about it, right? It's pretty simple. I think it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 6, 7, 7. So, um, we'll see. We'll see, right? They've got some picks. They've got, I think, a pretty solid roster. You've got some pretty obvious holes to fill, but I don't think you need to jump on anything. I think they've got a pretty open book here heading into the draft. They've got a good pick, right? Let's have some fun.
They're in a good spot. They're in a good spot. Someone who kind of fits Leo Chenal's profile a little bit is Caden Ellis out of Atlanta, another
Yeah,
linebacker that I think they could attack.
yeah, that was another
Someone,
name that I thought
someone
about.
who's
Yep.
versatile, who could play off the edge, who could play off ball. You know what I mean? So just similar profile, similar guy. Maybe is a little bit less expensive than Leo, but like I said, Bengals about
And
18
I don't,
million when you consider rookies and all
I
that. So
wonder if the hang up was years on a deal for a linebacker. I wonder if the Bengals were hesitant because of the rookies and because of what they've invested in the position. And again, they should draft another linebacker because this draft is stuffed with unbelievable linebackers. We'll talk about that in the next couple weeks. But I think that the Bengals will be looking at that, but maybe like a two, maybe even a 1 year deal for some of these guys. And that might be, where they're losing some of these people because these players want, security. They want to know that they have a job for 3 or 4 years. So, that'll just about do it for agency wrap up. We'll keep updated. We'll have to probably next week we'll have a much cleaner picture. We'll be able to react to everything the Bengals have done. Hopefully they do a couple more things. But I think so far they're
oh,
doing all right. Yep.
two thumbs up for
Thumbs up
me.
for me. I no complaints as of
Mafe,
yet.
Cook.
Yep. Mafe and Cook are two good players. I'm excited they're Bengals. Um, Mafe's a great story, by the way. Like his mom died of cancer. He signs "I love you" to his mom before every game. It's a cool thing. He's just a good Brian Cook also. Like they're two good human beings. They're gonna be good locker room presences. We talked about that. This will wrap it up. That Super Bowl mentality has to come back to that locker room, and those two guys have both been there and they've both done it. So bringing that in is very, very important as well. But hopefully we'll have some more moves to react to next week. Hopefully they're not done. I don't think they are. I will say that much. But hopefully they've got some more in the tank. And isn't it nice to not have to worry about getting free agent offensive linemen? Isn't that nice?
Yeah,
They just
yeah,
brought back
absolutely.
Reisner, who
It's
was already
one
in the building.
every year. It's the conversation, but wait, it's set.
Not this
Forget,
year.
forget about it,
Not
dude.
this
Go.
year. They're pretty good. In fact, I think they'll draft one, and then that might be it. So let's go. I think they're off to a good start on this offseason, but a lot of work to do still. That'll wrap it up for this edition of the Jungle Fever podcast. For Ian Crowley, I've been Ethan Sargent. We'll be back next week with a full free agency roundup here on Jungle Fever.